We're gonna talk today about the Oi house, a single-family house in Alforja, in a little village, but not far away from Tarragona, in the coast of Catalonia. Alforja is traditional agricultural village that you can find in many of the mountain ranges that are usually parallel to the coastline. Small, with a traditional church that is not necessarily especially important historically, but has this kind of value in the landscape, surrounded by all sorts of greenery and mountains in the back, windy. Alforja specifically is famous for its hazelnuts, really important production of hazelnuts, and olive oil. And the site that we encountered when we were commissioned the house was precisely a field of hazelnuts in the outskirts of the village. You can see here how it looks like, right? Like hazelnuts are not necessarily a kind of an amazing tree. They kind of are somewhere between a bush and a tree. The field had its beauty, though, and I think the presence of the tower of the church was always really important and actually took a really important role in the history of the house. The other thing that I think was key when we arrived there, in the back of the field, not part of the field, but actually another field from other owner completely, there was a recently renovated masia, kind of traditional house from the Catalan countryside. You can see there in the back, which is not exactly the traditional typology. It had been renovated, but it still maintained a feeling of a certain kind of vernacularity, let's say. You understand the scale of the village. You can see it there, right? Like this is a village that probably is not beyond 4,000 people, maybe with these massive fluctuations that villages like that have during the summer months. It reaches that number then, but then half of the year is empty. Again, it's cold. It's not far away from Reus. It's closer to Reus than Tarragona. Reus is a middle-sized city, so a lot of people probably is commuting there. The house, though, in this explicit point that you can see there perfectly clear, the hazelnut field was a house that was not a house for the summer. It was a house to live the entire year. The owners were living literally on the other side of the street in one of these, let's say, generic houses, probably built somewhere in the 80s, and got this space, this field, in a way that's probably a classic situation in a village like that. It's an inheritance, and therefore, even if the lot is quite big, you only get a third, but still the lot is usable. As you can see, even in the site plan, you have this funny condition. So the building has to occupy this a little bit too squeezed, but then at the same time is placed in a large field. And the other decision that they took immediately is that they wanted to get rid of the hazelnut trees, something that we tried to find, but we couldn't. Obviously, there was this notion that this is a garden that has some idea of agricultural garden, but still is a garden. What there was there that was amazing is something that is quite specific of this area, and Alforja has also a long tradition that is walls of piedra seca. The retaining walls were built with stones without using any kind of material to join them. Amazing kind of remnants that, interesting enough, are getting destroyed, and because the knowledge of the people or the knowledge to build them is almost gone, it's almost disappeared, cannot be rebuilt. So every reconstruction or every attempt to build them tend to involve cement and things like that, which makes them not really beautiful. So actually leaving them as a sort of a ruin became also kind of an impetus that we had, like, don't try to transform this thing in some kind of concrete retaining wall. If things are a little bit demolished, if there's greenery growing on top of it, is not a problem, right? So we started from there. That was the site. Sorry, one more thing. The site also had these amazing pieces of architectural bricolage. Well, you can see on the right a more classic off-the-shelf water tank, but behind it, built with a piece of a bed, some kind of wires, and whatever has found around, a little shed that probably is used to keep some of the tools that are used to deal with the land. This was another one, as you can see, made with chunks of things that are incredibly traditional, that you can find it almost in any village and probably in every city in Spain. But at the same time, there's not a lot of worry about kind of building up a complete whole, and therefore that's what makes it so amusing, a kind of seductive in a way, right? Looking at these things that probably the client there in the back was not so interested in. Anyway, the construction was a really long process, and it started in 2011. in the middle of, not in the middle, but the outskirts of the end of the 2008 crisis, right? So 2008 was not far away. The house took a little bit longer than expected to start building, and the construction company that took over was still surviving but struggling. It was kind of complicated kind of construction site. Maybe that's why it took so long to build, right? Like almost for a single family house that is 300 square meters, it took almost 6 years to get built. The house was conceived from the beginning to be built really fast, actually. Everything was kind of not prefab, because prefabrication in Spain at this scale in a village like that is not possible. But let's say everything was steel or plastic. We deliberately avoid the use of bricks. We thought of almost every single piece of the project to be almost clip-on. We got the steel structure up really quite fast, right? It's quite simple model, 11 by 15 in 2 floors, quite high, remembering that we are operating in a kind of agricultural world. So both floor, the ground floor specifically was 4 meters high, almost a place where you can keep the machinery. The top floor that it will eventually keep the kind of the quarters, following the typology also of the Masia, was slightly smaller. And the only moment in which we decided we were going to use some sort of more traditional construction method was the Catalan bolts that covered the second floor roof, right? Catalan bolts that, again, a traditional method that is quite lost as a technique. So we're built in a really strange way. Instead of being built as Catalan bolts work usually by using bricks to attach to each other, we need to have a formwork and then build the dome in there. But also because of technical reasons and regulations, we had to build on top of it a slab. It was not, we were not allowed to actually leave them as the only thing. So actually, it's a sort of Catalan bolt that functions as a lost formwork. The floor below, the one that separated the ground floor from the top, was actually what is called, I don't know how to say in English, una chapa colaborante, a slab made of steel and concrete on the top. And as you can see in some of the images of the video, basically the ground floor became this space in which life was happening almost. The idea was to recover a sort of a good life, a big porch in which during the hot months of the summer, you can have celebrations, but even during the winter, if you want, a place that, as you can see there on the right side of the screen, the celebration of the opening of the house in happened, right? Like you build a quick kind of big table in which a lot of things could happen, a lot of celebrations. The result, as you can see, is basically a house divided in two. On the bottom, an agricultural space. On the top, a much more cozy, almost, of course, a reference to the GEZE house by Le Corbusier, a kind of enclosed, deep, a place where you can be safeguarded from the wind and from the cold of the cold months. This sort of schizophrenia was possible not only based on the typological structure of the house, right? A ground floor is almost empty, but also because the clients themselves asked for this division. The commission was quite strange. They asked us to have 2 houses, one on top and one on the bottom, 2 houses in which they will live all year. But they wanted to move to the house on the ground during the summer and move to the top floor during the winter. Because, and this is a beautiful story, they considered that going on holidays outside of the village was ridiculous. They wanted to go on holidays within the house. It was, one of these fantastic moments in when you're working in an office, right? Like, who gets a commission as beautiful as this one? So actually, we designed 2 houses. One that was for the summer, that is this one, a house that, as I was explaining before, is a massive porch. It's a porch that when you open up the polycarbonate sliding doors, becomes basically part of the landscape. The floor that is basically a kind of concrete, polished concrete, literally is at the same exact level as the exterior. You just have a massive continuity. You are actually outside. You can live outside all the time. the rooms that go with this typology are almost invisible. They're like basically the minimum amount of space you need to actually put a bed in. The house on the top, the house that was dedicated to the winter days, to the cold, was the opposite. Was a house that almost worked like a globe, a house in which you will feel completely safe, with the roof with the ceiling that I mentioned before, with the Catalan bolts, a house that not only makes you feel like that, but also allows you to look to the outside by being inside. It's full of windows, it's full of views, but this, instead of being polycarbonate plastic, what you get is big windows that allow you to see different places. One of the places that is more important, of course, is that the owner said that she liked to cook looking at the church tower. So one of the windows is literally pointing at the church tower, as I say. And then, when you put all these things together, you get a sort of schizophrenic relationship that is sorted out in the joints, right? But the joints here are not the joint of, a material with another material, but it's the joint that puts together two typologies. How you get from loft space of kind of a LA-like summer house to an enclosed mountain house that could be somewhere in the coast in the Mediterranean. What is the joints that allow you to do that? Well, one thing was, as explained before, how we do this roof, how we do a roof that is heavy enough, even if it's held by something that seems light. And we use the Catalan bolt, as explained before, but we decided to use a really specific construction solution. The Catalan bolt, so probably is based on a system of placing the bricks that one brick holds the other. They are work like a sort of triangulations and can keep growing, so you can build it without using kind of formwork. As I explained before, we couldn't find no one that we could afford that will build it like that, so we build it as with using a formwork. So we decided to actually show immediately that this dome was actually fake in a way. The bricks are placed one against each other. The joints make them look extremely floating, right? How this thing is holding each other. This is not a traditional kind of Catalan bolt. The outside was another question. As I explained before, the bottom was a massive door made of plastic, made of polycarbonate, made of the material that is often used in industrial and agricultural warehouses. What to do with the top? How we can think about the top? The decision was to use, as we have learned in some of the pre-existing small kind of huts, something that we can find everywhere, literally a persiana. This thing that, is typical from Spain, not so typical outside in Spain, element that allows you to block completely the sun. And in this case, we've used kind of an aluminum one, but with a little trick that we didn't not only use it in the windows, but we decided that cladding will allow us to give a kind of an homogeneous outside to the entire house. So basically, the persiana became not only the persiana that closed the windows, but actually the outside of the walls that were, as I mentioned before, absolutely clip-on. There's not a single brick in this house. So actually, they're basically drywall with 2 layers of insulation, plus an impermeabilization and another drywall, and therefore you need at the end cladding. The cladding we went for was literally that persiana that allow us, as you can see in this image, to have this game with this kind of reverberation with the pre-existing pieces of vernacular architecture that we found in the side, the kind of the water tank, of the sheds for the agricultural elements. If we look at the details of how this thing was built, it's a kind of 3 details. One, that is how this house touches the ground to make sure there is a continuity with the existing field. How we actually are able to hide the kind of the 30 centimeters of a slab with a kind of draining in the edge, so we are sure that we're not going to get water, but at the same time we don't get too big of a step to go outside. So in that delicate corner, we can actually introduce the system that allows us to make the entire polycarbonate door that is 15 meters long disappear, fall continuously, and go all the way to the edges. Of course, a complicated thing that not only in terms of construction, but also in terms of explaining to the client what it means to have a house that literally in which the facade not only can, but needs to disappear the majority of the year, and how to make this thing, understanding a door that is not only 15 meters long, but it's 4.5 meters high, moving it out or taking it, opening a kind of an operation that is extremely simple. Initially, those doors were supposed to be also a place in which the cars would be parked eventually, but that's the beauty of some of the design decisions. We always thought that the car will never be there because the space was too nice and they will love it, and that was the case. As soon as we finish it, the owner decided that he will never park the car inside, even if he loved the car so much. The car is always outside now. The next detail that is key is how we shift from loft-like space, a kind of a LA good life space, into a space that is cozy, that is taking care of the body, of the warmness. The steel that hold the concrete of the slab, you see it as steel from the bottom. On the top, we got again concrete, but it was polished and slightly tinted to get a kind of more beige tone, something that was already kind of giving you a sense of warmness. All the interior was made with ukume. So the steel columns that were so present in the level below disappear and were covered by massive kind of closets made of ukume. So basically any surface that you encounter in the entire second floor is warm, is this kind of wood, is plywood, it's not like a natural wood, but at the same time, the ukume has this, I think, this slightly darker tone that already is playing with the color of the floor and the bricks on the ceiling. The other two things that the detail was really important for us was to make sure that the frames of the windows won't be seen from the inside. If you look closely to some of the details, you will see that the frames of the windows are all like slightly low in relationship to the edge of the slab, and also high up in relationship to the edge of the slab on top. That produces this fantastic effect. At no point when you're walking through the second floor, you see any frame. You just see this openness, this windowless almost space. You don't see the frames, and also when the windows open, because eventually they can actually open, they disappear in the thickness of the walls. One of the great things about having no bricks and having all these different layers of dry walls is that all these windows will kind of get in the space between the persiana in the outside and the wall. And in some moments, you won't know if there is a window or no window. The third detail, which I think is really important, is the one that connects that roof, right? We start with a structure that seems to be light, that is almost steel and nothing else. The second one, that even if it's still a steel structure, the Catalan bolts on the top and the closet closing the column, so it soon seems almost like a wall structure. And on top of that, we have a really heavy roof, not only because it has the Catalan bolts, but because it's also a green roof. A roof that, as you can see, basically is not a green roof in the tradition of painting plans. It's basically the same land that was on the place where the building was built, placed on the top, with the minimum amount of elements that a house needs to actually exist, a series of ventilation, chimneys, and things like that, right? That detail also have to take care of the persianas, or you hide the persiana, or you put it there, making sure that when it's an automatized system, it kind of functions by itself, but at the same time have to be registrable. You can be able to repair it. This is the only place where we use, as you can see, 5 bricks to hold those systems. And kind of also work as a sort of end of the building, right? Like kind of the last piece that in the pictures, I think shows really nicely with this kind of friso on the top, right? Like that, depending on the position of the steel plate, will have a complete different kind of texture, right? And these changes were almost random. We didn't design the changes, but it actually gave us that sense of building a cornice quite stable. I think this image basically summarizes the project really beautifully in a way. You can see here the use of the building, how each of these tectonic decisions have allowed to actually function literally as we imagine, but also at the same time in a really surprising way. the client buying one of these temporary swimming pools that is also quite similar to the water tank that is a few meters behind there. Plants are starting to cover the little balcony that is on the front to the south facade. We can see through the polycarbonate on the left, the boxes that are the little rooms, but literally doesn't matter right now, I think, have become a sort of massive storage space. And this life, this kind of other version of a Hockney painting, a kind of a much more Iberian version of the Hockney jumping into the biggest splash, is one that we, the team that we did that includes not only myself, but Cristina Goberna and David Tapias, bring us a lot of joy, because I think we've been able to find what is the effect of getting two typologies that are quite stable and clashing them and allowing kind of a family to take over dramatically.